I really like what they've done, obviously, the last couple of years. Everybody seems to, and for good reason. The one concern I have, though, is maybe how much they're counting on this next group of rookies to do what last year's class did right away. How important is it for this team to have their rookies succeed as rookies this year?
Yeah, well, and I mean, last year I think just with like the tackles, I think there was somewhat of an even bigger risk there because if it's for some reason Charles Cross hadn't worked out or whatever, you were really going to be back to square one. I don't know that this year's class has necessarily. I mean, you're not looking at any guy there as if this guy doesn't pan out, the season's going to go away. It's a little bit more of a if Jackson Smith and Jigba is really what we think he's going to be, then we've got a 3-man receiving trio that's going to be as good as anybody's in the NFL. So I think there's sort of a little bit more of that kind of upside with this year's class. Even Witherspoon's sort of that way. I mean, it's they've got some good corners obviously with Tariq Woolen and Mike Jackson playing pretty well last year, but kind of looking like he's taking a step forward this year. And Trey Brown being back to health and all that. So if Witherspoon really turns out to be all that, then you've really got a cornerback core that could just be a lot better than it was last year. So I think there's a little bit less of that. But where I would agree with you for sure is just the defensive lineman. I mean, you need Derek Hall to be a guy who can come in and contribute right away as an edge rusher. You're going to need Mike Morris to be able to step into a key role as one of the interior defensive line. But if neither of that happens, I don't know that it necessarily kills the season. I think it's just more of if those things do happen, then this team could really take that step from being a 9-win team to maybe even be an 11 or a 12-win team.
Do you feel like covering this team, who Jamal Adams is the last 3 years?
Well, yeah, that's a great question. I mean, it's been hard to really get a sense of that because we've seen him so little in so many ways. He's just kind of battled injuries, obviously, since he got here, and then even during the off-season programs and stuff like that, he's kind of been coming off surgeries, it seems like, all the time. So it's been hard to get that sense. I don't think it's breaking news. I mean, this is going to be a make or break year for him with the contract that he has and the way it's set up for the future. They're committed to him for this year and to try and to hope he gets healthy and to hope they can find a role for him where he can really be a defensive playmaker. And if not, then they'll have a hard decision to make, or maybe even not that hard of a decision to make after the season, depending on how it goes. But I think we're going to see him play. A lot more as a closer to the line, as an in the box player, and I think they want to use the 3 safety sets a lot that way. And that's another guy that I haven't mentioned yet. When you talk about the secondary and how it's going to fit together, is Julian Love, and you see him obviously working with the starters a lot with Quandre, and you see them moving those guys around a lot, and then you envision what they're going to do with Jamal when he comes back, and Julian Love's going to find his way onto the field a lot, even when Jamal comes back, because I think they want to do that a lot with kind of using 3 safeties and just trying to mix and match those guys quite a bit. So, the danger there, I guess, can be if you try to have everybody do too much, or you not, they were so successful, obviously, in the LOB era when they just sort of threw 4 defensive backs out there and they knew what their role was at every play and they played every snap, and that was that. With this group, you could have a little bit more trying to, have specialty packages and things like that. But I think that's a little bit the way the NFL is going to try to combat what offenses are doing.
Maura told me yesterday that Witherspoon was actually working inside at nickel a little bit. Is that to set up sort of a competition almost between Mike Jackson and Kobe Bryant?
We haven't seen Kobe Bryant, and so we've only been able to talk to Pete once in the last 3 weeks, and we didn't ask what the situation is with Kobe, so we haven't seen him out there. So I don't know if some of this is simply that he hasn't been practicing, and so then obviously somebody's got to play the nickel spot, so they're trying to roll some guys through there. They did. I wrote about this a little bit for my story for today. On draft night, they did say that that was a spot they would consider Witherspoon playing is the nickel. So it's possible they just were throwing him in there for some of those snaps yesterday to get a feel for how that would look. And the Trey Brown yesterday, because of that, who had been doing some nickel, seemed to be mostly playing on the outside. And they've had Jarek Reed playing some of the nickel as well, the 6th-round pick. He's a really interesting player also. This is sort of the time of year you do some of that, and you let guys get a lot of snaps and you see what it looks like before you then take the break for training camp. So you have some film of guys doing that. So my sense is it's probably as much that as anything. But I think it's something they certainly would consider if it's a way to get what they would feel like is their three best corners on the field. I think that's ultimately what they're going to want to do is find who your three best corners are and get them on the field in the spots where you feel like they could be the most effective.